Hey there, it's Dave Altavilla for HotHardware here with my good buddy Marco Chiappetta.
What's going on, everybody?
And we are here today to build a killer gaming rig / content creation powerhouse powered by an AMD Ryzen 9 9950X 16-core processor and gobs of RAM. But on tap, we have a number of brands in the mix here to help us with this build. And so we want to give a big shout out to the folks at Corsair for this beautiful chassis, 1000-watt power supply, some Corsair cooling. ASRock is here with an X670E steel legend motherboard. We've got MSI SSDs on tap, all kinds of fun coming up next in this build, so stick with us. You gonna help me with this, Marco?
I'll do my best.
Yeah, you better.
So, bro, I don't like to read manuals, so what do you say we start out by putting the CPU, memory, and SSDs into this motherboard? Then we'll get the cooling built, maybe cram the power supply into the case, and then put in the rest of the hardware. What do you think?
I cram things all the time. Sure, why not?
All right, let's do it.
And I should have said, but wait, there's more. We can't forget about graphics, and that is none other than the GeForce RTX 4090 Founders Edition from the good folks at NVIDIA. That's going to be providing some serious graphics firepower for this content creation and gaming powerhouse. All right, and let's get into the surgery. Marco's going to show us how it's done here.
Yeah, well, I'm going to try. There's always a few gotchas when you're building a rig, so we're going to take a lay of the land first. I already see a few things that we're going to have to accommodate. So first, let's see how big this GPU actually is. So with the GPU in this motherboard, we're going to lose one M.2 slot, but we're not planning to use that one anyway. So with this MSI M570 Pro SSD with this large heatsink, this guy obviously has to go here so it doesn't interfere with the GPU, but we're going to have to lose this heat spreader. The Corsair MP700, this also requires cooling, so we're obviously not going to put it underneath the GPU. We're going to put that guy down here underneath this heat spreader. The memory is just going to pop right into the slots, but I want to point out this board actually, the first two DIMMs go in slots A2 and B2, not A1 and B1 like you'd expect, but you know that is what it is. As for the CPU, that should be fairly straightforward. It's just going to pop right into that socket and we should be good to go. All right, I think we're just going to start with the CPU. Obviously, very straightforward process. You can leave that protector on this socket. It's going to pop out when we put the chip in. We're going to line up our alignment triangles there. Drop in the chip. She's safe. And now when we lock it, that protector should pop out and bang, CPU's done.
Well, it's like you know what you're doing there.
I've done that a few times. Next, the memory, also fairly straightforward. Line up your notch. Make sure you're plugging it into the proper slots on your board. There is DIMM 1.
Gotta have those two snaps.
And DIMM 2. All right.
Snap.
Memory is done. CPU is done. Let's move on to the SSDs. Okay, so we've taken the liberty of loosening the screws on the M.2 heat spreaders. We're gonna lose this heat spreader because of the MSI, the cooler on the MSI SSD. If you were to use it, just remove this protective film over the thermal pad here. So let's get this MSI drive installed. Oh, and first problem. This guy is not going to fit in this slot because of the heat pipes. It's bumping up against the VRM cooling here. So we're just gonna have to swap places. We'll put the Corsair SSD up here and we'll put the MSI one at the bottom.
And we'll actually use the motherboard heat spreader and heat sink to cool the Corsair.
Exactly, so I am gonna just see if I can peel this off with these gloves on.
Just like you told them, do it.
There we go.
There you go, kid.
All right, let me just get a screw in that SSD.
Yep, these are the pitfalls. Once in a while...
Actually, it doesn't need a screw. The heat spreader is gonna hold it in.
Even better. Once in a while, physics gets in the way.
Exactly.
Pain in the butt, physics. In this case, physics didn't like our little heatsink on the SSD. But I tell you what, that Spatium's going to be a beast of a drive. And this Corsair MP700 is dang solid too at 10 gigs a second, 2 terabyte drive.
Okay.
In the slot it goes.
And we are solid. Let's come down here. All right, so we're gonna lose this whole piece. There's more thermal pads there. Let's hang this guy. What do you think? We'll go this direction, or you want to be able to read it? We'll go this direction.
Yeah, I think that way.
Okay.
I think that's what I'm thinking.
Now, can we get a screw in here? I think we're gonna need a different screwdriver, but you get the gist.
Yes. All right, hold the phone. We got one more thing we got to check out. We got to get that big honking 4090 in the slot and check it for fitment, right?
Yeah, so after that first speed bump, we just want to make sure we're not missing anything before we start stuffing things into the case. So here's our 4090. Let me line it up with the slot here.
That is physics in motion right there.
All right.
Oh, satisfying
in
click.
the slot, I think we're good. Obviously, CPU is good, memory's good, GPU is in the slot. There's nothing touching it. If we come to the front over here, this is the only issue. The MSI SSD has this large heatsink. It's right in front of the GPU fan. We do have some clearance. Technically, some of the heat from here is going to get pulled into the GPU, but minor issue in the grand scheme of things, and the SSD is going to stay nice and cool.
All right, so let's talk chassis and power supply. Next, we have the Corsair 6500X series in white here, as you can see. Fish tank style design, love that. Lots of access and viewing of the beautiful components that are going inside right now. Beautiful thing about this case, and we are leaving the plastic on to protect the glass currently, but just right underneath here, 2 fingers, you pop that out and you're inside. As you can see, motherboard tray area here, cable guides, run all the wires around back, behind everything. And actually the power supply, let's look at that next and we'll show you where it goes too. This is the Corsair RM1000X Shift, 80 plus gold certified efficiency power supply. And the Shift is kind of interesting. All the connectors here are on the bottom edge and they're going to point down in behind where the motherboard tray is. So let's go show you where that goes. Coming around back here on the back side. I'm going to put this down for a second. I'm going to pop these captive thumb screws, pull off this vented side panel. You can see that's all perforated and vented. Nice white vented, all vented side panel for the back side. And this is where the power supply goes. Now shift to the bottom and flip that guy around here. And we're mounting in just like that. So all the wires are going to come through these guides right here, cable guides, and come right into the bottom of the power supply. So let's get that going next. All right, so now we're going to hit some cooling.
Yeah, so Dave and I have been game planning where we're going to mount everything. There's lots of options with this Corsair case and this Corsair cooling and fan setup. So this is actually a really cool setup. The fans on the cooler and the standalone fans, they use Corsair's iCUE link technology. So basically, there's no wires between the fans and there's no wires dangling off the fans. There's these male and female connectors on the fans themselves, and you can link together as many as you need. We're going to put 3 across the top, and the cooler, we're going to mount it towards the back of the chassis. We have 2 spare fans as well. We have a 120 millimeter jobby here that we're going to mount this one to the back and potentially 1 on the bottom, but we got black fans. So I think we're going to order 3 white ones, and that'll be a separate add-on after this build is complete. So it'll be cooler across the back, blowing air out of the chassis, 3 fans at the top, pulling air up and out, and we'll make the rear fan an intake. And when we get the bottom fans, we'll make those an intake as well. So one really cool feature with this Corsair case is there's actually a bracket for the cooler that comes off the chassis, and it makes it really easy to mount onto the radiator. So I've already put in a handful of screws here, but super simple. You take off that bracket and just attach the radiator to it, and then the whole assembly just plugs right back into the case. So this bracket just drops right into these slots right on the chassis. Lift it up, get it in place, and 1 screw holds the whole thing together. Before we mount the PSU into the chassis, because the cables are going to be pointing down, we're going to plug in everything we need. We only need a handful of cables for the motherboard, which requires 2 ATX 12-volt connectors, and we need 1 additional PCI Express connector for the Corsair cooling controller, and 1 more for the GPU. This is an ATX3 power supply, so we don't need to use any of the included adapters with that GTX 490. But really cool setup. Little tiny cables here. They just plug right in. This PSU is fully modular. We're going to just lock them into place and plug in everything we need.
PSU screws.
So the Corsair cooler that we're using requires the removal of the stock motherboard mounting brackets. So Dave's just pulling those off now. There's going to be a few standoffs that screw into the stock locations, and then a couple of brackets that get mounted on top of that.
All right, we're going to install the motherboard now. Got to line up the I/O bracket in the back of the case, line up all the standoffs, Make sure we're in there nice and tight. All the standoffs line up, nothing shorting out. And we'll install some screws. So before we mount this, as you can see, we got our cold plate here. It's got some thermal paste already pre-applied by the folks at Corsair, so that's nice. But these are Intel socket brackets, and we need to go to AM5, AMD AM5 socket. So we're going to pull these out, and Corsair gives you another set of brackets for AM5. We swap those in. And we will be ready. Oop. There we go. Make sure they're in tight. Yeah, we'll be ready to go and mount down on the motherboard socket now. Okay, we are now going to mount the cooler to the socket and get our thumb screws in place. You can see there's a little bit of tension on those brackets. A little thumb screw action. And we're going to go crisscross with our thumb screws, just for giggles. Mounting the top side case fans.
So we're at the stage now where we can start plugging in some cables. You know, we're kind of taking the lay of the land and figuring out where to feed cables through. I stuck the two ATX 12-volt CPU power connectors up through this corner, and I'm just plugging them into the motherboard now. And we will go around the rest of the board. We have to get the ATX power connector here, figure out where we're going to run the GPU power connector, and then there's one more power connector for the Corsair controller for the cooler.
All right, so now we did some serious cable management. What do you got going on?
Well, we did some cable management. Off camera, Dave and I figured out the right holes to route all the cables through. So the front side of the system where you can see the motherboard is mostly clean. We kind of wish we had white cables, but it is what it is for now. So from the back side of the motherboard tray, we have the ATX power connector, all of the front panel connectors, a few extra cables and connectors for the Corsair cooler and the lighting controller that's included with it, ATX 12-volt power connectors up here. So the front side is coming together. We're almost done, but let's take a look at the back. So yeah, that's the mess we have on the back side. It's actually not too bad because there's very few cables that are going to the motherboard. We have the GPU power connector and a spare PCI Express power connector going to be for the cooler. But these are all the CPU and motherboard power connectors, front panel stuff. We're gonna kind of route this neatly, zip tie what we have to, and we'll get the back side clean as well. Then we'll stick the GPU in the system, and I think we're ready to power it up after that.
You're looking sexy on that computer, I just gotta tell you.
Hey, yeah. Okay, we probably have a little bit more cleanup to do, but we've routed all of the cables. We threw some zip ties in to clean it up a little bit. Some things are a little tight. We're not gonna really yank on those cables. We're just gonna leave it because nobody's gonna see this back here. But at this point, we're ready to power the system up. All of the cables are plugged in, everything is tied down and mounted, everything's getting power, everything's getting data. So I think we're ready for first power up.
All right, so we're ready to rock, about to power this thing up shortly, but I want to make a quick comment about building in this case. The Corsair 6500X, really nice, spacious case, very easy to build in, and really liked the simplicity of Corsair's iCUE Link lighting for all the fans and lighting in this case. And so yeah, let's hit the power button, but just a pleasure working with this build with the Corsair case and the lighting system.
Make sure that PSU is switched on too, brother.
Oh, the PSU? Oh yeah. Okay. Please boot.
I see lights.
Please boot. You see lights?
I see the H50i lighting up.
Oh
the
yeah.
The display is lit. We've got some RGB action going.
Excellent. We're going to boot into BIOS, you think?
Oh, I see ASRock on the screen.
Oh, there you go.
Everything just lit up in the case, and we are at the BIOS menu. Very cool.
No explosions or anything.
Not yet.
All right, so this rig is really quiet and it's ready for an OS. We're gonna go have some fun a little bit, so stay tuned for that, because all work and no play makes Marco a dull boy.
A few minutes later.
Oh, how's the girly drink?
Ah, it's good.
Yeah, man, you can't be building PCs all day. You gotta get out and get a little sunshine. You can go see the round thing in the sky.
Exactly. This is work, though, still.
It is.
Technically, we're still on the clock.
Say computer.
Computer.
Business expense, yep.
What's in your hand?
It's a little cold one. It's a little, for me at 30 times, so
You drinking on the job?
a little bit.
But nestled under the Corsair H150i LCD cooler is the Ryzen 9 9950X 16-core CPU. And boy, it is running cool and quiet right now, 29C. We are idled in the BIOS right now, but stepping around some more specs, 64 gigs of Corsair Vengeance DDR5 6000 memory. We've got our RTX 4090, GeForce RTX 4090 in there, and all of that is housed in the ASRock X670E Steel Legend motherboard. Lots of Corsair cooling, RGB fans, and what am I missing? I think I got it all. Oh, Corsair 2 terabyte PCI Express Gen 5 SSD, as well as an MSI. Tell me.
It was the 2 terabyte M570 Pro.
M570 Pro, yes. SSD as well. So a couple of PCI Express Gen 5 2 terabyte SSDs on board as well. This thing is loaded for bear. We're going to boot it up and get an OS on it. All right, we're back from a fun-filled day here, and it's booted up, and we got Windows installed and a little Cinebench action going on. We get 2273. That's our score. I think that's right in line with a 9950X these days.
Yeah, you beat the score I got in my review. It must be the extra cooling in this rig.
So we got a little 3D Mark Time Spy action going here, and as you can see, the Corsair H150i Link cooler is doing a fine job at 40C under load. Or how about a little Black Myth Wukong at 4K ultra quality presets, pulling over 70 frames per second. All right, so we're all buttoned up and complete here, and I tell you what, that was a really easy build inside the Corsair 6500X chassis, all-white chassis, beautiful build, lots of RGB going on. The Corsair H150i LCD cooler, all-in-one liquid cooler, is pretty snazzy as well. And thanks to the folks at ASRock for that fantabulous X670E Steel Legend motherboard, and Corsair memory, and of course the folks at AMD with the Ryzen 9 9950X 16-core CPU. Tell you what, fantabulous rig and a great day here in scenic Rhode Island with my buddy. It's been a while since we built a rig, right?
Yeah,
bud?
Especially unsupervised without anybody around us. Good stuff.
Good stuff. Good stuff for sure. Make sure you stop by. Find us on the web at hothardware.com, twitter.com/hothardware, youtube.com/hothardware as well. Hit thumbs up and subscribe, would you please? So you get notified when we go live with our 2.5 Geeks live stream or with one of these fantastic PC builds. Until the next time, we will have to say thank you for stopping by, and my buddy will say what? What will you say, Marco? Say something. Oh, yeah.
Good seeing everybody. We'll see you in the next one.
Peace.